What's up, everybody? Welcome to LTB Live, where I'm your host, John Delray. Yeah, Claudia's not here today. She just had to go running out. I don't know as if she's going to make it back by the end, but so you get me. But let's talk Green Bay Packers, as there's a big injury report out for the Green Bay Packers following their padded practice. Yes, they opted to put the padded practice today. LaFleur explained in his press conference that he felt as though he just wanted to give it a little bit more time this week before they got into pads, considering Sunday was such a grueling game. So padded practice was today, and it's a big injury report for a couple of different reasons. One, it's quite lengthy, but also two, who exactly is on it. So let's go through that, and then I'm also going to update you on some of the news. We haven't seen each other since Marshawn Lloyd went on the IR, so we're going to talk about that as well, and then we'll see what you folks have to say. So the injury report, as I said, lengthy. Let's start with the Packers side of things. One, Kenny Clark limited with a toe injury. Kingsley Enagbare back up to full today with his groin injury. Josh Jacobs limited now. Josh Jacobs, even the beat is reporting like there's just nothing to worry about here. He had 32 carries. What do you expect? So yeah, he was limited again today. Elton Jenkins returning to practice today on a limited status. Tucker Kraft limited with his shoulder injury. Jordan Love, we'll get to him in just a second, but Jordan Morgan was another DNP today. I'm not sure that bodes incredibly well for the rookie for this coming weekend, so another DNP for Morgan. Josh Myers is limited today with his ankle injury. From the sounds of it, sounds like he's going to be okay. Jaden Reed elevated to limited today with his calf injury. I'm assuming he should be fine. Zach Tom limited with a quad. Carrington Valentine, DNP with an ankle injury. And then Rasheed Walker limited with a shoulder injury. And if you ask Matt LaFleur, what is the deal with these injuries? What are the particulars of what they're doing in practice, etc., he just says they're limited. Now, yesterday he used that refrain when it came to speaking about Jordan Love. Today he used that refrain for all of them. The reporters tried getting details on individuals, and LaFleur was giving nothing, just saying they are limited. Okay, so we may see quite a few questionable designations tomorrow once the actual injury declarations come out. The big one here, obviously, quarterback Jordan Love. It's definitely more than gamesmanship at this point. I mean, everyone from Green Bay has said all along, this may not be some 3 to 6 week thing. It's he was questionable last week before being downgraded to doubtful. And we talked about, is this gamesmanship? Is it real? By all accounts, it sounds real. And it sounds like there is a legit chance that we may see Jordan Love this coming weekend. Even Adam Schefter changed his tune earlier today. Schefter, out of all of the reporters with Rappaport and all the national guys, they've all held out that this is a longer-term injury, that it'll be 4 to 6. Well, Schefter today maybe got a better source because he changed his tune a little bit, saying that his source told him that it's about 50-50 right now for Jordan Love against the Titans. But on the team side of the things, it kind of feels like they've just been honest all along and been saying, yeah, we're going to give him every chance, and he's progressing nicely. So it stands to reason he has a very legit chance. I do have to believe, though, if there is any question, they're not going to aim to push this injury for Jordan Love. I think if he's kind of on the border this weekend, then we may see them just sit him for another week. Yeah, that would be true Packers style. They're going to want him to be good before they bring him back, so we'll have to see. Cabin Cabbles, what's up? CBS report injury list, Batman. Yeah, holy injuries, Batman. You are not lying. It's a lengthy list. But as LaFleur was kind of alluding to, it's not totally unexpected coming off of what was a very physical game. Let's see what else. Will, what's up, Will? Finally seen it live. Hello, my friend. What's your prediction for this game? So much depends on what quarterback is playing. But I think no matter what, the Packers are a more talented team than the Titans. And yes, they know Malik Willis very, very well. I think in some ways it would be tougher to do your run the ball 40 times against the Titans than it was to do this last week against the Colts. So ultimately, Packers are a more talented team. This should shake out to be a victory for them, but what form that victory takes, two wildly different paths that may occur if it's Jordan Love or Malik Willis. So let me get to the Titans injury list first, then I'll get back to questions. But I know a couple got clipped there out in the bottom. But Luke Gifford, linebacker for them, was a DNP today. Jeffrey Simmons back to being full participant. L'Jarius Sneed back to being full participant today. And then Ty J. Spears, their running back, was limited way shorter of a list for the Tennessee Titans than the Green Bay Packers, but ultimately Simmons and Snead, the two biggest names on the list for them, they're both fine. They got vet rest days yesterday. They're both completely fine. And then Tyjae Spears, when you dive into the Tennessee side of the world, go look at what their reporters, there seems to be pretty full confidence that he's going to play this weekend. Even their offensive coordinator spoke earlier this week about how they want to get the snap counts more equal between Spears and Pollard, whereas over the last couple weeks, Pollard has more so dominated the snaps. Got to be thinking Spears going to be good to go there as well. All right, now let's see what you guys got. Captain Kels, Matt seems to be a lot more mental gymnastics with the injury reports this year. Makes sense, though, until QB1 is ready. I know it's not all gamesmanship, but I think Matt has really buttoned up about what info he lets out of the building over these last 2 years. I would agree with that. I don't know as if he's getting like more crafty in terms of the injury side of things. I think he is buttoning up more, though. I would agree with that. Especially when it comes to QB1. He's really not giving anything away besides he's progressing. And I got to say, a good reason for that may be like other teams are getting more aware of what guys are saying. Even not completely relevant, but look at the game. It was CJ Stroud this last week talking to the Bears corner, Jalen Johnson. And Stroud said, yeah, I heard what you said on the Richard Sherman podcast. You're not going to get me that same way. Like, players are listening to other players. There is a downside to all of this media availability when guys jump up there and just give away their secrets. So LaFleur, maybe he's leaning a little bit more into that too. All right. Will saying, looking fresh. What's your biggest thought on the defense with the use of Williams finally? Does he get more reps? I was really happy to see Evan Williams out there really at all against the Colts, considering he had 0 the prior week against the Eagles. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. I think Williams did a nice job. Bullard, at least in the last game, probably did a slightly better job than Williams. The thing is, they both play the same spot, but they go about it in very different ways. Williams, you can utilize to rush the passer. The evidence was plenty there at Oregon. But ultimately in the NFL, he's probably a little bit more of a zone space defender, a little bit more of a true center fielder versus Bullard, which can be your hyper aggressive, play him up near the line. You could play him in the slot, etc. What I do want to see them explore more of is the big nickel package where they put Bullard in at the slot and Williams back at safety and then move Keyshawn around as necessary. Although I don't really love Keyshawn on the boundary. Maybe he just needs to play a little bit more dime, less nickel. But not even that Nixon's been terrible through 2 weeks. It's just I really like this sky-high potential that having Williams and Bullard on the field together seems to present. I think Williams does do a nice job, but I think, as Hafley actually just talked about in his press conference, for a number of these rookies, the field is still moving very, very quickly for them. And at safety, that's a very dangerous spot because with Hafley's vision and break principles, if you're even a half step late, that's the difference between you making a play on the ball and the receiver catching the ball. And so maybe that's what they're trying to get Williams up to speed with. Patrice, what's up, Patrice? How are you doing? Thanks for being here. Cabal's going to come down to our D-line. Mike Wall rightfully has said, despite appearances, the linebackers are asked to do a lot more than previous years because of the high risk, high reward cost of this. I understand that, right? It's just kind of a natural consequence. When you ask your D-line not to just occupy space laterally anymore, but instead ask them to attack downhill, the risk is that your linebackers are going to be caught in the fire then of a D lineman overshooting or being overzealous in their rush lanes, right? What's interesting, though, in my mind, is throughout the first 2 weeks of the season, we have not seen that crash D line very much. There's been spurts, but it's not nearly to the level that we thought Hafley was going to bring it about in his principles, right? Now, against Tennessee, I think that all can radically change because we're not worrying, excuse me. Yes, Levis has had some nice scrambles. Don't get me wrong. No one's confusing him with Anthony Richardson or Jalen Hurts. So now I think we're going to see a little bit more of the Hafley principle, a little bit more of the ultra aggression that we all were kind of expecting throughout the course of the offseason. I think we're going to get a much better read on how well the D-line is doing now that it's a game more primed for that kind of thing, if that makes sense. I'm sorry, excuse me. Will, who do you think are biggest weaknesses on both offense and defense? Oh, Will asking the big question. So I'm gonna go defense as of right now, despite the adamant defense from Jeff Hafley of him. I think defensively, your biggest weakness right now, realistically, is Quay Walker. Because again, over the last 2 weeks, they haven't done what we thought. They still have done a lot of reading, a lot of having to do decision making at the linebacker spot, and we all know that is not Quay's strength, and he has been exposed a number of times in that regard. So I guess I gotta circle him the biggest right now defensively. Offensively, I think the biggest vulnerability offensively is probably going to have to be Sean Ryan. He's done some nice work in the run game, which is obviously incredibly important right now. But at the same time, Malik Willis on 14 dropbacks faced 2 pressures last week. Both of those pressures were allowed by the same guy, and that happens to be Sean Ryan. I think Sean Ryan is progressing. He probably is realistically playing at a better level than he ever did last year. But he's still, especially in pass pro, he's a bit more of a liability than what any of the other 80% of the line have shown thus far. And more so than what Morgan has shown in these small bursts that we've got him there. Cabbles. By comparison, when Aaron's toe was hurt, it was minute-by-minute info compared to the thumb, where we all knew it was hurt, but he kept that broken tag under wrap for like 6 weeks. Perks of the Packers always reporting everything from hamstrings to hangnails. My thoughts on Nixon is you want him taking all those big hits, not the corners or safeties being smashed into. Fair. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. I would agree. I mean, Aaron also, as much as like he was out there on McAfee and kind of speaking for himself, he did lead the cover-up about the toe, like you acknowledged. But Aaron was just so much more out there in terms of access than Jordan really shows. I also think Jordan is much more of a organizational man, and that realistically, like LaFleur or Vice President Wallers or whatever have said to him, like, hey, we do not want you to divulge these details. Don't. And Jordan goes, all right, I won't. And then he doesn't. Aaron, they probably would say that, and Aaron would figure out a way to not say the details, but still like go around to get Aaron out what he wanted to get out. You know what I mean? Like, Aaron was so good later in his career at manipulating his words in the way that he wanted. I do think it gives a very, very different feel. Will, in Jeff's newest interview now, said he should have played. Why didn't he? You think he was scared to mix up the flow? Jeff's newest interview now said that he should have played. Should have played. Will, let me know who you're talking about in terms of who should have played. And then I, because I did just watch that Hafley interview. I can probably give you an answer if I know who you're talking about. Jeff also stated he's big on Quay Walker. I hope he gets going this year too. Yeah, I know. Like, I thought that was very curious. That sounded to me like Hafley really just kind of banging the drum for his guy, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Hafley is a coach's coach. He's a player's coach in a certain way as well. Like, he wants to build up his guys. Hafley, I've been referring to him all offseason as a teacher. Teachers don't like to disparage their pupils, right? But the fact remains that we can hope that Quay gets better. We are now in year 3. And yes, he's being asked to do radically different things eventually than he did under Barry. But we're now a couple weeks into year 3, and it's like Quay Walker's weaknesses have always been Quay Walker's weaknesses. And what we're not seeing is this radical improvement from Quay in that regard. And really to start turning over that narrative, to really start looking at Quay and be like, all right, he is now a worry-free defender. We can have the whole thing like run through him. He can handle the calls. He can handle everything. Then that's where we're going to have to start seeing like some changes in that regard. And that's not what we're seeing yet. Let's see. Oh, okay. So now we're talking about Nixon. Kevels. Yes, what I mentioned earlier about Keyshawn. You mentioned that you want Keyshawn to be the one taking the hits in the slot. The thing is, though, if comping him against Bullard, I have full faith that Bullard would be able to do that as well. He certainly did at Georgia, playing the slot, and long duration of time that he did there. So if we're going to directly comp him to Bullard, then I have no issue with it. In terms of like the ideas that I've seen out there about like, well, let's get Valentine and Stokes on the field at the same time. Have Valentine start playing slot. He can do the man coverage there. Yeah, okay, then I understand. You don't want Valentine getting run into all the time. But if you're comping him against Bullard, yeah, I think that that would be fine. And Bullard seems by all accounts, collegiately and what we've seen thus far, that he can mix it up in the trenches just fine. Oh, Will, you're talking about Williams. Okay. I think, yeah, like, I trying to think exactly to what Hafley's quote was. They wanted to get Williams out there more. I would put that in conjunction with Cooper, too. Like, they need to start getting Edgerrin Cooper out there more. But the thing is, ultimately, I think it is a bit of a flow thing. I think it also is a bit of a trust thing. Like, in terms of, yes, Evan Williams played the whole preseason. Edgerrin Cooper did not. He missed the vast majority of training camp. And two, we know, even with LaFleur, play callers, they get into rhythms. They get into personnel groupings and just may want to maintain status quo, especially if it seems to be working well enough. And I have a feeling that that's what we were looking at right there. Will also saying thoughts on our front four. Who do you think needed to step up more? So in terms of the D-line, I can tell you the one that I'm actually kind of disappointed in thus far, which feels really weird to say, Kenny Clark. Like, Kenny has still done some nice things in terms of pursuit, but thus far, over the course of 2 games, Kenny's run defense has been a little lackluster in my mind. Like, there's been some times, there was one clip in particular against the Eagles. I'm trying to remember the linebacker that was behind him. There was one linebacker that basically just got washed out of the play. But part of the reason that they got washed out is because Kenny got completely washed out, and I mean like full on pancaked in front of him. So it's just it's uncharacteristic to see that out of Kenny Clark, and we've seen it a couple times now through 2 weeks. And he's one guy, at least in the run defense realm, that I'm looking at saying like, all right, if you're going to be the leader, you have to become more of a rock in that way. Other than that, I would say the rest, like Rashawn and Preston and LVN, all of them from a pass rush standpoint have been a little lackluster, but at the same time, it's kind of been their job. We need to see a game where they're truly unleashed in order to really assess what we got going on there. Gavels, Mike Wallace pointed out the issues with Quay are more new things than additional things. Yeah. IQ, he is getting more handsy, and physical issue right now, he's not understanding when to back off for pass. Yeah, I would lump that like into the same realm of things. And I think that that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, we're not talking about the issues for Quay are all of a sudden like he's doing things differently or he's doing things wrong compared to what we saw last year. It's more so the matter of what's been the issues has always been the issues, and it's been his decision making, it's been his vision, his ability to read, etc. Whatever cluster of colloquialism you want to throw that into, right? And I think that to me, now you say like Wall says that it's about understanding when to back off for a pass. Okay, I would also lump into that as well, his decision making into which way he is supposed to pursue the hole, because we see at times he goes to the right when he should be going to left, and vice versa. So again, that's kind of the thing with Quay. Oh, and here we go. When he should be fitting. Sorry, this is the second part of your comment. But I'll always say, if your biggest weakness on defense is linebacker, you don't have a weakness on defense. Hope this is not taken as contrarian. No. I think we're saying this roughly the same thing in different languages. But you don't have a weakness on defense if your biggest weakness is linebacker. I can get with that. Yeah. I mean, realistically, just like right guard on the line, we've talked about how like that's the least place of emphasis. It's probably the least important on the line. Linebacker in a 4-3, much the same. Now, the only real difference is, I guess it's kind of the same. With a right guard, if your right guard is awful, it can wreck the whole line, right? If your linebackers are truly awful, well, that can wreck a game plan too, because you're essentially having to use other guys to then cover the intermediate part of the field where you'd like them to be backing up, especially if you're playing too high, or like what Mel Kiper wants to ban if you saw all that nonsense earlier today. Will, how do you think Stokes has done so far? I think he looks good, but want to see him get his. I'm inclined to agree. It's been really encouraging. Now, what was interesting was Hafley, as I know you watched that press conference too, Hafley talked about how having Valentine play more over Stokes a bit this last week was more so about Valentine having earned it. Not that it really was a matchup thing. It was the fact that Valentine has just been playing exceptionally well in practice, and so they wanted to get him on the field. Naturally, though, in my mind, that did lead me to go to a place of like, okay, we're praising Valentine, saying Valentine's going to get on the field. What does that mean for Stokes? Does that mean that Stokes is not practicing as well day in and day out as Valentine? Does it mean that they're seeing something that Stokes isn't doing as well as Valentine? Ideally, you'd love both of them to be progressing at the same rate, right? Wonderful pair of corners. But it was just kind of that automatic, like, okay, well, if one is doing well, about the other who just got supplanted. Ultimately, though, in the Eagles game, I think Stokes did pretty well. And I think Stokes, though, is still working himself back to being that man coverage rookie year corner that we saw, and hopefully he can get back to fully. Kevin Kells, Kenny over the years seems to start off kind of hot, fizzle out, and then be good down the stretch, which is partly what's kind of weird about this. You're right. I mean, generally it's like weeks 6, 7, 8 from what I'm remembering last year is when we began to see shades of like, oh, he might be fatiguing, etc., etc. It's just kind of odd that we're seeing some Kenny washouts in weeks 1 and 2. It's just not something we've really seen before. I'm not sure that there's a tremendously good reason for it that we can possibly know, but it is something that's kind of shown up a few times. Kevin Kebbles, I think we all agree that the new safety room is definitely a godsend. I don't think this team is nearly as competitive with the X picks that just feel automatic at this point. Thank you, Giants. The fact that the Giants let him walk is still baffling, but I very, very much agree. Right? The 1 year overhaul, much like we've seen Gutekunst do in the past for other things. Goodness gracious, peeps. Much like we've seen Gutekunst do, where he flushes a position with talent. He did it at wide receiver. He's done it in other spots. He tries to do it on day 3 with the O-line like every year. But realistically, safety was that room this year. And I really think like X, I've said it before, he's just everything that's been advertised. He's been an incredibly sure tackler thus far. He's been opportunistic in coverage, and his versatility has been off the charts. When we first signed Xavier McKinney, those were like the 3 things you could point to and say like, well, that's what he's going to bring. And he has. Wonderful. And it's totally stabilized the room. And it's made it so you can have a rookie or rookies next to him and still have it be okay as they're learning, because he is so steady on the opposite side. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about, I've seen some stuff about Marshawn Lloyd. Granted, yes, he's been put on IR. He's going to miss at least the next 4 games, this time with an ankle injury. And we know, like at first in camp, it was a hip. Then it became his hamstring, and that's what was kind of hampering him for the first couple games. And now it's an ankle injury that he suffered against the Colts. So it's just 3 different injuries, all seemingly piling up. And I've seen some, I don't know what to say, like narratives out there. I've seen just some assumptions, maybe is a better word, from others, that this is just going to be the way that it's going to be, that he is an injury hampered back. And maybe he just can't handle the grind of the NFL. And it's like, for me, from my angle, yeah, 3 injuries is concerning. Sure. But it's also week 2 of his rookie year. And you're also looking at a guy who collegiately did not really have that many injuries issues in college. I mean, 2021, he played in 12 games, 2022, 9 games, 2023, 11 games. So this isn't a guy who was missing 6 games a year in college and they drafted him based off of the spurts of when he was healthy. No, this is a pretty durable back by all standards in college. No, he didn't run the most, but still, it's not like he was missing time with these large-scale injuries. And so I just feel like for those that are out there already saying that he's just going to have an injury-riddled career, like, whoa, it's week 3 now of his rookie year. Yes, he's been placed on IR. I would not be shocked if some of these injuries kind of running a certain way and it opens up itself up to another injury in another spot. Like, it could be something like that. And maybe the Packers just ultimately looked at him and said, okay, like, you've taken a lot of hits. We need to get you right. Take the 4 weeks and get yourself right. And then come back. And then you can start with a clean slate. That feels way more like what's going on than like, oh yeah, he's just an injury-riddled back now and we're just going to have to deal with this for eternity. Chalk him up as change of pace, like I saw some others talking about today. That doesn't jive well with me. We're way too early for anything like that. Big Al! Hey, Jon, do you think that if Malik Willis is starting this week, do you think he's going to have more throwing opportunities? Yes. However, I'm not going to say like all of a sudden it's going to be a typical Love game plan. It'll be somewhere in between. I do think ultimately he is going to have more opportunities to throw, but part of the reason for that is because thus far Tennessee has presented themselves as a better run defense team than Indianapolis has. And Tennessee's personnel is built more to stop the run than I think you could argue Indianapolis is. I mean, with Simmons and Sweat, and then they've got Ernest Jones at linebacker, and Kenneth Murray, who's not having a great start to the year, but still, that's better than what they were going up against in Indianapolis. So I think the envelope will be pushed. Plus, too, now that you got away with that for a week, I'm not sure you can walk into another consecutive week of just saying, all right, we're going to run the ball 45 times. We're going to pass it as little as we can. Like, no, Tennessee is going to be way more prepared for that in that way. And so I just think we will see a natural uptick, but it's not going to be like Willis is suddenly throwing it 40 times. It'll be some, maybe low 20s rather than 14. Cavs, people will overlook it, but I will always wonder how the season looks if A.J. Dillon was able to play for us. I think him being able to be the passing back and pass pro guy versus Jacobs and Wilson would have done wonders for him. I still think of him, and we don't celebrate injuries, of course, legit removing 3 Chiefs secondary guys from the game by halftime. He would have loved last Sunday. Yeah. I think when the story of this season is written, I agree. I think it's going to become forgotten really quick, but we shouldn't. Matt LaFleur even said, A.J. Dillon had a role on this team. It's not as simple as people were trying to make it, where like A.J. Dillon was truly on the fringe. And if he didn't have a good enough preseason, he was going to be cut for Emmanuel Wilson. Like, no. LaFleur was pretty adamant, and A.J. Dillon had a role on this team. And like you say, maybe it was the passing down back. Maybe it was a different role. But to have him along with Jacobs over these couple of weeks, yeah, it very much would have come in handy. For what it's worth, LaFleur did acknowledge today, though, that he is significantly more confident in giving Emmanuel Wilson double-digit carries if he needs to than he even would have been a few weeks ago, because of the progress that Wilson has made in several different areas of the game. Sounds pretty promising. We'll have to see if it actually comes to fruition. If they need to run the ball that much again, I don't know how long they can bank on 30 carries a game for Jacobs, but they may ride it out as much as they can. So, all right, everybody, time for me to get jumping on out of here. I'll be back tomorrow with the preview for Packers versus Titans, diving in especially to what the Titans have done over the last couple of weeks, who they are, as well as what we can expect this coming weekend. So thanks, everybody. All right. Yep. All right. No more sneaking in here. Thank you, Lick Evels. All right, everybody. Go have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. And as always, go Pack Go.